Hello, I'm Richard Sher, and it's time to square off. This week's Square Off special, Israel at War. Our panel, Rabbi Mitchell Wohlberg, Rabbi in residence, after more than 40 wonderful years as spiritual leader of the Beth Tefillah congregation, and he's a regular Square Off panelist. Rabbi Rachel Sabath, the inaugural rabbi at the all-new Har Sinai Oheb Shalom congregation. It's great to have you with us, and you're doing a great job over there. Pastor Shannon Wright, CEO of the Urban Engagement Initiative, former Republican candidate for mayor of Baltimore, and a regular Square Off panelist too, and Torrey, whose unbelievably fabulous talk show is on WBAL radio weekdays 2 to 6 p.m. And yes, he too is a regular on Square Off. The death toll nears 3,000 on both sides, people in Gaza and Israel, including close to 30 U.S. citizens, somewhere between 100 and 150 hostages captured by Hamas, with thousands of others injured since Hamas launched its unprecedented attacks last Saturday, prompting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to declare war and form an emergency government and wartime cabinet. And we'll start things off with Rabbi Mitchell Wohlberg. What's your reaction, Mitchell?
Event of last Saturday is another one of those days that will go down in infamy. What took place by Hamas is not only unforgettable, but it is unforgivable. Once and for all, Hamas and others who come to kill innocent Jewish people must be eliminated.
Rabbi Sabath.
I absolutely share the sentiments of Rabbi Wohlberg. I think what we are facing here as the Jewish people is an attack not just on the state of Israel, but on the Jewish people. And in fact, I think it was a massacre perpetrated against all of humanity. I think all decent human beings should be calling out for Hamas to immediately release the captives. And only then, I think, we'll be in a position to even have a conversation about Gaza, or be able to continue conversations with Palestinians. We're not at war with Palestinians. We're at war with a terrorist army, and it is up to the world to step up right now.
Pastor Shannon Wright.
I appreciate the distinction between being at war with the terrorist groups, not the Palestinian people. The loss of life on both sides is staggering. You know, some of the atrocities that we're seeing here are things that we have not seen before. And I would have preferred not to have. They change you, seeing the things that are going on here. This is depravity, inhumane, a long list of words to describe it.
Torrey, I know you've talked about it on your show.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about what's going on?
So quite frankly, it's horrifying because it is a reminder of the depraved state of humanity in general. Anytime there's a war, nobody wins that war, just one person loses less than the other. And when you look at the scope and scale of, the destruction that is primarily impacting people who are not active combatants in this war, that have no means of defending themselves and are simply, subjected to the whims of a terrorist group, and it's just horrifying. And in other ways, I find it humbling, because it is also a reminder that we are not that far removed from horrible atrocities, maybe only 60, 70, 80 years removed from the horrors of World War II. And it's just a reminder that if we get too arrogant in our society, if we get too arrogant thinking that we solved everything and don't become vigilant, we can find ourselves witnessing horrible things that we, like many of you, are only accustomed to reading about in history books, and we're seeing it unfold before our eyes. So I find it harrowing and humbling and sobering as we try to think about what the path forward is.
And Rabbi Sabath, I see you sort of nodding in agreement with what Torrey just said.
Yes, I think that what Torrey said is what the human question is here as well. Obviously, we Jews, and I'm Israeli, so we feel this very acutely. It's being done to our collective body. And I personally have lost to the Hamas massacre at least 2 people that I know personally. And our nephew was seriously injured. I just learned yesterday, defending one of the Jewish communities that was attacked, and he's in the hospital right now with a pretty serious injury to his head. But they were able to hold off the Hamas attackers from turning that community into another site of massacre, of multiple deaths. There were only, it's horrible to say, but only a few deaths in their particular community. And so it's deeply affecting all of us. And what Rabbi Wohlberg said, in that the fact that there will always be a before and an after for the Jewish people. This will be one of those moments that is absolutely will change all of us. As Shannon said, it is changing how we understand the significance and the importance of Israel and its right to self-defense. And what I was nodding to in terms of what Torrey said is that any human society, any civil society that strives for decency has to be vigilant about these forces. And really, this is now the role of the world. The Palestinian people wasn't able to extract this terrorist evil from its midst. And so now it's up to the world to extract it, to protect all Palestinians, all Israelis. And of course, we know that Hamas has agents all over the world. Immediately, 2 Israelis were gunned down in Egypt. They were just tourists in Egypt. We know that there are alerts for all of us Israelis and all of us Jews, especially today. So this is not just about what's happening in a very tiny place in the Middle East. It's about what's happening to humanity right now, and to all decent people. We have to fight it.
Rabbi Wohlberg, this has been compared to our 9/11. Do you agree with that?
It's been compared to our 9/11, but 9/11, the target was specific spots, the World Trade Center, so on and so forth. Here was indiscriminate killing of babies, burning babies, raping women. This was just barbarity. And people have to understand, this is Hamas. Now, does Hamas represent the Palestinian people? I'm not qualified to answer that question. But the reality is, as long as there is a Hamas, there cannot be peace, because Hamas's charter calls for the destruction of Israel and says that negotiations are out of the question. The Palestinian people have to stand up and oppose Hamas. Otherwise, there's no possibility for peace. Richard, people forget.
Go ahead.
In 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza, lock, stock, and barrel, with no promises of anything on the part of the Palestinians, and said, here, it's yours, start your state. And what happened? Hamas took over, and areas that Israel had given to the Palestinians turned into launching pads for rockets against Israel. There was never an attempt by the Palestinians to make a state out of Gaza. What should we say now?
Well, I will say, and then you'll get the story. On Friday, as we recorded this program, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken began a tour of 6 Arab capitals to build pressure on Hamas, while Israel readies its massive offensive on the Gaza Strip. And the attacks came, as Mitchell Wohlberg said, as a complete surprise. Israel, noted for its world-famous intelligence network, had nothing on Hamas's plan, apparently, to attack Israel. Torrey, what are your thoughts about that, about the intelligence that was blown here?
So I'm blessed to have relationships with people that have served in intelligence, and I reached out to them immediately and asked. I said, "How does something like this happen?" And one of the important perspectives that I was quickly reminded of is the persistent threat of Hamas. When you have someone that is always plotting, someone that is always threatening, someone that literally, as part of their charter, sees the destruction of your nation as their constant mission, it's hard to pick out, what's bluster and what's bluff. We also know that there appears to be a deep level of coordination involving Tehran and Iran. And we know that with those resources and some of the obfuscation that may come as a result of the foreign policy decisions that have been made recently, while it seems a little unthinkable that nobody was aware of this at all, it having a bit of context of the persistent threat there, again, it's kind of like, if you're always under threat and always under watch, what do you take seriously and what do you not? Something like this, completely underwritten by a foreign independent agent, could absolutely happen, and it's tragic. And the response from Israel is making it pretty clear that they're not going to take this lying down.
Pastor Wright.
So when you look at the scope of what happened last Saturday, and that they're now saying that they've been planning this for 2 years, it leads me to wonder how far, who helped that we're not aware of, and how they were able to keep this so secret. When you do things in life here, and you're planning an event, you're doing whatever you're doing, once you share it with one person or two people, it kind of takes on a life of its own and spreads. So I'm curious to know, and it is very disturbing and curious to me, how they were able to plan something of this magnitude. We're talking about air, land, and sea, and have it completely be a surprise.
Richard, I think Reverend Wright is, absolutely correct. I think one of the terrible results of the war that's taking place, a result that will last for many years, is the average Israeli has lost his sense of security. I mean, I've been to Israel literally 50 times, and Rabbi Sarah lived in Israel. We know when you go to sleep at night in the King David Hotel, and you sleep very well and feel very secure, because the Israel Defense Forces and the high-tech community are aware of everything that's going on and is protecting you. That sense of protection has now been lost.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
No, sorry, Rabbi.
That's all right.
Thank you, Rabbi Wohlberg. I couldn't agree more that it has shattered a sense of safety on one hand, and there will be a lot of investigations of how this is possible. But I want to first respond to what you said, and then respond to what Pastor Wright was asking, which are really, I think, the right questions to be asking. The Israeli military establishment has some, deep investigation to do. That said, the mobilization effort, the immediate deployment of all of its forces are going to be now, I think, on an alert in a way and able to respond even more quickly than what they thought they needed to be on other fronts. And so I see this actually as it's going to make us stronger. I think Israeli society, which was split in many ways, it has demonstrated that it has come together in unity and in determination And I see a stronger military. I see a stronger Israeli society already forming from what we're involved in and aware of in terms of the organizational efforts. We've seen Israelis who had committed millions of dollars to the School of Economics at Harvard University turn $12 million that they had planned to give Harvard, and they showed up in the south of Israel and handed it over to the pro-democracy Brothers in Arms group. So we're seeing world Jewry unite. We're seeing a determination and a strengthening of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. I think we all have to stand strongly with Israel, that Israel has a moral right to defend itself. And if there are those still with missiles today, almost a week later, able to aim those missiles at us to try to destroy us simply because we're Jews in a Jewish state, that has to be eradicated and the world has to support it. So that's what I wanted to say about our strength and the strength of the IDF. To Pastor Wright's really important point about how is it possible that people didn't know. First of all, there are Israeli generals that were sending warnings. And that's part of the investigation about how those were heard, how those were understood, what their intelligence was. So that is to be evaluated. But what I think most people don't understand is that, and why I distinguish and think it's essential to distinguish between Palestinians and Hamas, is that we're talking about two parallel universes, that where one is existing above ground in the Gaza Strip, and one is existing in what they call the Gaza Metro of terrorism. There are 25 miles of underground tunnels where Hamas seeks shelter. It is there only to protect the terrorists. They have no concern for what's happening. Hamas has no concern for what's happening to innocent Palestinians above ground. Those are two different parallel realities.
Let me just interrupt for a moment and add to this. Those tunnels were built with money and equipment that came from the EU and from other Arab countries and so on and so forth, that were meant for the people of the Gaza, to give them to rebuild the entire structure of their lives. Hamas took the people's money and built the tunnels to attack the Jews.
And now they're using the Palestinians who are above ground as human shields. And they didn't care when they took the money that was supposed to help them build schools and feed their children. They do not care what's happening to them now above ground. And that is why Israel is, with all humanity, asking for the civilian population to evacuate. It has no choice but to go underground and get those barbarians before they behead more of our children.
You are watching a Squirrel special, Israel at War. And we do have 4 wonderful sponsors who have given up most of their time so that we could extend our show today. But we want to thank them. And here to do that is the voice of Squirrel, Howard Mallison. Howard.
Hey, Richard. Pappas restaurants and sports bars with 4 area locations and a menu second to none. Treat your family to a Pappas Fab Cake. Leading edge auto body and mechanical repair for collision repair or general service. They work on all makes and models. 410-433-6433 or visit at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. And our good friend, attorney Barry Glazer, who will help you get the revenge and compensation to which you are entitled at 410-547-8568, and Double T Diners from Route 40 West to Annapolis and everywhere in between. Double T Diners, totally terrific for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Back to you, Richard.
All right, we're here at squareoff.net. Do want to mention that Squareoff is now in our 40th year in the Baltimore TV media market. Torrey, when Rabbi Sabath was speaking about security and how we found out or didn't find out, you were nodding. You have something to add to that?
Well, I can tell you that obviously, whenever you have a urban warfare setting, and when you have a situation where terrorists are literally using human beings as shields, the only thing I could think of is that the world is going to need to give a lot of grace to Israel as they try to deal with the situation. And as I told my audience yesterday, this is going to get very, very ugly, and a lot of us are not going to like what we're going to see. But I compare it to many circumstances. Often when I'm talking about Baltimore City, I talk about dental work, right? And you have a cavity, and if you let that cavity get too far along, at some point you're going to have to do a root canal, and it can be a painful, uncomfortable process. And I feel like Israel is in this situation where they have to go in and they literally have to carve Hamas out of Palestine. As both rabbis have aptly mentioned, while there is a distinction between Hamas and Palestine, there doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency from the Palestinian locals to excise Hamas from within their community. And so now Israel has a lot of work to do, right? There's going to be a lot of soldiers involved. And I do think it is to the credit of the IDF that amidst what the kind of restraint that not even really the United States showed after 9/11, Israel is telling people, clear out, get out the area. I think I saw an update that they're asking 1.1 million people to get out of Gaza because they're going to go in and do what they need to do. What concerns me about this is that memories are short. Obviously, the horrific images that took place over the last several days, they're going to fade, but Israel's response is going to persist, and it's going to go on for a long time. And what I'm concerned about is that global support for what Israel is doing and eliminating the Hamas threat might fade. I hope it doesn't, but we've seen this happen before, and I think we need to be resolved in supporting Israel as they advance through this. Even now, we're dealing with campus protesters that are, under misguided notions, somehow advocating for the actions of Hamas. And it's completely inappropriate on so many levels. So it's really our responsibility to keep people reminded.
Richard.
Yes.
Torrey's going to make me cry.
Why are you saying that? I mean, I understand, but
because it's not just Jews who care about their fellow Jews. That a person like Torrey or Reverend Wright or the President of the United States have offered such support for the Jewish people in this time of crisis is one of the only good things that has come out of all this. It reminds us of what a great country we live in with all of its problems. Richard, I went to the dry cleaner this morning to pick up some clothing. Now, this is an Asian American. And he says, Rabbi, I want to give you something. And he has this envelope with Israeli money that people over the years have left in their clothing and got lost. And he didn't know who to return it to or what. So he's been holding on to this money and says, here, take this money and send it to Israel to be of help.
wow.
So beautiful. There's so many stories like that.
That's it. So we hear about the idiots at Harvard and Columbia University, seemingly intelligent people who turn against Israel at a time like this. But the overall American people stand with us in our time of crisis. And I can only say, God bless America.
Pastor Wright, come on in.
I'm glad we kind of got into the direction that we're going. So about Harvard and the other schools, it is deeply disturbing to me that some have gone as far as to say they feel Hamas is justified. So I want to be really clear about something. Once you're born and you get to a certain age, you have choice and you have the ability to make decisions. But any group of folk that feel it's okay and justified for any reason to take the lives of babies and to do to those babies what they did, there is no justification. None at all. So when we look at the things that are happening, and we look at the ignorant comments that are being made from privileged folks in their academic ivy towers here on their very safe soil, well away from what's happening in the Middle East, and not having the years of life experience to be able to understand how ignorant and stupid they sound, you have to give them a little room and say, oh, please go sit down quietly in a corner somewhere till you learn something and understand how to deal with life and the world and society. There's no justifiable reason on this God's green earth for killing, mutilating, decapitating, injuring babies. When you are a person of faith, you understand that your goal is to be able to help communities grow, to help support families. And families' goals is to have children, to repopulate, to share what they've learned with the next generation, and to guide that generation, and to grow and nurture that generation, and plant in them the seeds that you hold dear. And for anybody to say that an organization, a group of folk that are willing to do that is justified in any way, shape, or form, y'all need to sit down and be quiet somewhere in a corner till you learn something. There's no nice way to say that.
I would like to know what happened to Rabbi Wohlberg. He is
He
vanished.
was having a challenge with the connection, but I wanted to jump in here if I could in the meantime.
Please do.
So, Pastor Wright and Torrey, your words are so heartfelt and so important, and actually bring me to tears to know that you understand and you support us when we stand against such atrocities. The Jewish people are no strangers to atrocities, and as I know you both know, but to stand here as a human being and to even say these unimaginable words that more Jews were killed, haven't been killed on a single day since the Holocaust, is to call upon the world, all those who believe that the Holocaust is something that should never happen again. Here's your hint to the world. It is possible. It is possible that a society can allow something so evil to grow in its midst, and look at what it is capable of. And one of the most amazing things that the Jewish community has experienced is your support that I'm experiencing, we're experiencing right now. Also the fact that that President Biden and the whole United States administration is standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel, is able to look at the unspeakable horror and speak about it to the world. Those signs of humanity give me hope. Give me hope, not only in America, but perhaps one day also hope in the larger world. And I know that American Jews are listening very, very carefully to what you are all saying, to what President Biden is saying, and to what other candidates for public office are saying. And we're also hearing their silences very loudly.
And Rabbi, can I just add to that? I never would have imagined a situation where anybody could do the things and say the things that are coming out of our college campuses and like do that in public without fear of massive public outrage. I don't understand that. I really do not. It is shocking to me. I'm sure you're familiar with the letter from the Harvard student groups. There were protests even as of this morning at UCLA, and people that are screaming and shouting in large numbers the type of horrific things that can only come with a level of stupidity, let's be frank, that we haven't seen in years and years and years. And again, what's troubling to me, and I think that while we're looking for accountability from Hamas and from, you know, the terrorists that are involved in this, I am looking for accountability from our education system. I'm looking for accountability from the political leaders and the activists that have allowed this sentiment to bubble up like a cancer to the point where people are somehow in their minds rationalizing, making very similar rationalizations that we saw in the early 1900s. And I don't like to make those kind of comparisons, but I'm telling you, it is terrifying to me when I see large groups of so-called educated students rationalizing behavior that in any other time in history, probably even jumping back centuries into the Roman era, they would have considered barbaric. And yet people with a straight face can boldly go out in mass and start defending this and trying to rationalize this kind of thinking. How backwards and uneducated can that be? That is infuriating.
And it's scary. It's more than that. It's a little, no, it's more than a little scary. Because I tend to say things that sometimes I probably shouldn't, but I'm gonna anyway. To all of the non-Jewish Black folk watching this show, let me be real clear. The kind of hatred, the kind of anti-Semitism. So when you get into isms and schisms, they're really closely related. So for those of you that feel, well, that's them, not us, think very carefully about that. Because the type of people that could express the anger and the hatred and the anti-Semitism that they are in this situation would be the same people that would be taking those same isms and schisms out against your children and your grandchildren.
Absolutely.
Here and abroad. So for those of you that think there's a separation, that's them, not us, you need to think about that a little bit more carefully. With science right now and technology, when you look at all these genealogy websites, is there really a them and us anywhere? I mean, realistically, there isn't. We are one human body. Not only that, most of these folks that consider themselves educated also consider themselves to be a people of faith. There are very few faiths that I know of that would glorify the atrocities that we're seeing. So let's be real clear about that. What is it you are showing your allegiance and your faith to? For those of you that feel it is something to glorify, killing children, women, innocent people on either side, you need to go back and slap your grandmama because obviously they taught you wrong.
Well,
We have a commitment, we have an obligation to teach today's folk and tomorrow's folk better so that this does not happen again.
all right. What we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to tell you that Rabbi Wohlberg somehow lost his connection. He and I have been in touch with each other. He's unable to rejoin us and just hopes for the best. I'm sorry about that. We thank Rabbi Wohlberg. We're going to go around, the three of you, for your final comments, final thoughts here at squareoff.net. And we'll start with Torrey, and then we will go to Reverend Wright, and then we'll come back to Rabbi Sabath, who is somewhere.
I'm here. I'm here. I apologize.
Okay.
Okay, so this is going to be my thought, and we're going to talk about this on the program today. I personally believe that the President of the United States, along with other leaders, needs to have a very serious heart-to-heart conversation. And I'll go back to my, root canal example. Whenever you're facing a major procedure, what does your dentist do? They sit down with you, they walk you through the procedure, they walk you through the recovery, and they tell you exactly what's to come. I think that it is incumbent on the president and many of our leaders to have this conversation with the United States, because those of us that are aware of this and those of us that understand that, yes, things are terrible right now, Israel is going to need to do some things, and it's okay to say that we're not going to like what they need to do. There's going to be a lot of bombs dropped. I am expecting that there's going to be a land invasion. You're going to see videos on social media. Twitter's going to blow up with all of those things. I think that the wisest thing for our leadership to do is to say, this is what's coming. Brace yourself. We're going to have some timelines. We're having some clear.
And be clear, it's what's happening because of Hamas.
Correct. Yeah.
Israel didn't ask for this.
Properly contextualize it. Exactly. And to keep it in context.
Hamas is doing this to the Palestinian people.
We have to make sure that as Americans that we keep this in context, because there's going to be a huge effort. I promise you, there's going to be a huge effort to distract, and they're going to want us to forget everything that happened over the last couple of days. All the videos, we probably saw the videos of that poor woman in the back of the truck, right? They're going to want us to forget all of those things and simply focus on this. we as a responsibility, I as a communicator and as a broadcaster have a responsibility to keep in the forefront that in the weeks, the days and weeks, and maybe even months to come, Israel is going to need to make some very hard decisions.
All right.
Give them grace to do it.
Shannon, your final thought or thoughts?
My final thought is that war, nobody wins. I think Torrey said it best. Just one side loses less. We're seeing loss on both sides. The fact that my brain doesn't conceptualize war well. The destruction and the loss of life doesn't register well with me. So I gotta say, to have that warning for people to get out of the way of what's going to happen, I think is a wonderful thing. I think it shows some grace to try and get as many civilians out of the way as possible. I agree with Torrey that there's going to be some things that we're going to hear and see over the coming days and weeks, hopefully not months, that we're not going to like, that aren't going to sit well with a lot of us. But we also have to understand sometimes in the Bible and in all books of faith, there's a time for everything. And sometimes there is a time for war.
All right, Shannon. And finally, Rabbi Sabath, to close this up.
I want to pick up where Pastor Wright left off. There's a time for peace and a time for war. Israel, and I speak now as an Israeli, Israel has been working and working and working for decades for a time for peace and has made many offers of peace to the Palestinian people. And I pray that we will one day find ourselves being able to make those offers as well. But there's no conversation to be had right now until our hostages are brought home. Bring them home. Allow all of the human community to call out. Bring them home.
I want to thank all of you for participating in a really stimulating and interesting. And I'm sorry that Mitchell Wohlberg got lost somehow, but I want to thank all of you, the thousands of you who follow Square Off regularly. Thank you. We'll see you again next time. Let's pray for peace in the world. And we'll see you next time at squareoff.net.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.